A 7-year-old girl's scream in a school parking lot, "He's not my real dad," stopped everyone cold. The man dragging her toward his car had no legal claim. Within an hour, her uncle Marcus Steele Donovan received the call. By noon, 85 motorcycles surrounded Riverside Elementary, engines rumbling like controlled thunder. What began as a custody dispute would expose a killer's desperation and prove that sometimes the family you choose is stronger than blood. Steele hadn't seen his niece Emma since his brother's funeral 9 years ago. He'd made a promise at the graveside, "I'll always be there." But grief had driven him away. Now Emma's mother was dead under suspicious circumstances, and a dangerous man named Vincent Crowe was trying to claim the child. Steele made one call to his motorcycle club. The Iron Sons answered without hesitation. 85 riders, one promise, and a little girl who refused to stop believing her uncle would come. Vincent had killed Emma's mother for her assets and forged documents to take the child. But he didn't count on Emma remembering the biker uncle who'd promised to protect her. He didn't count on a brotherhood of veterans who understood loyalty. And he certainly didn't count on the wall of steel and leather that would stand between him and the girl he tried to steal. The scream cut through the afternoon like a knife. "He's not my real dad. Somebody help me." Janet Morrison, a third-grade teacher, dropped her coffee and ran toward the parking lot. A thin man in a faded jacket was dragging 7-year-old Emma Bradford toward a rusted sedan. Emma's sneakers scraped pavement, her voice breaking with terror. "Sir, stop!" Janet shouted. The man turned, eyes hollow and desperate. "This is my daughter. We're late for an appointment. She's screaming that you're not her father." Stepfather," he corrected, grip tightening on Emma's wrist. "Drop a comment if you're already hooked." Emma twisted and bit his hand. He yelped. She bolted into Janet's arms. "Lock the doors," Janet told another teacher. "Call the principal." The man, Vincent Crowe, though Janet didn't know it yet, stood by his car, rubbing his hand. "You're making a mistake. She's confused. Then you won't mind waiting while we verify your identity." Vincent's face darkened. He saw phones coming out, parents staring. He swore, climbed into his car and peeled out of the lot. Emma shook violently in Janet's arms, whispering the same words over and over. "Uncle Steele. Call Uncle Steele. Please." Inside Principal Margaret Hayes's office, Emma sat wrapped in a blanket, clutching an unopened juice box. Margaret pulled up Emma's file. Parents: Claire Bradford, deceased 2 weeks ago. Daniel Bradford, deceased 9 years ago. Emergency contact: Marcus Donovan, uncle. Margaret dialed. A deep voice answered, "Yeah? Mr. Donovan, this is Principal Hayes from Riverside Elementary. I'm calling about your niece, Emma Bradford. A man tried to take her today. She's terrified and asking for you." Silence. Then, "I'm 2 hours out. Don't let anyone near her. I'm coming." "Mr. Donovan, the police, I don't care. Nobody touches her until I get there." The line went dead. Margaret looked at Emma, who stared back with desperate hope. Somewhere on a highway, Marcus Steele Donovan pushed his Harley harder, the wind tearing at his leather vest. 9 years since he'd seen his brother's daughter. 9 years since he'd made a promise at a rain-soaked grave. Some promises don't expire. He made one call to Harlan Knuckles Webb, president of the Iron Sons Motorcycle Club. "I need the brothers," Steele said. "My niece is in danger." "Say no more," Knuckles replied. "We ride." The junction truck stop sat 30 miles outside Riverside. When Steele pulled in, he expected maybe a dozen bikes. He got 85. They stretched across the parking lot in tight formation: choppers, cruisers, touring bikes, chrome glinting under afternoon sun, men and women in leather vests, all wearing the Iron Sons patch, a steel fist gripping a broken chain. Knuckles stood at the center, arms crossed. "You called. We answered." Steele's throat tightened. "You brought everyone. Brother, you think we're letting some coward mess with a kid? With your kid?" Knuckles gripped his shoulder. "She's family now. That means she's ours to protect." A woman named Cass, former army medic with a scar down her cheek, revved her engine. Kids remember who shows up, not who makes excuses. Knuckles spread a map across his tank. The guy's name is Vincent Crow. Priors for fraud and assault. He's desperate, which makes him dangerous. Then we make it clear, Steele said. Nobody touches that girl. That's the plan. Knuckles grinned. Let's ride. The convoy moved like a living thing. 85 engines in perfect sync. A rolling thunder that turned heads on every street. When they reached Riverside Elementary, people stopped and stared. The motorcycles filled the entire parking lot in a perfect V formation. They idled. Nobody moved. Then Steele dismounted and walked toward the entrance. Principal Hayes appeared in the doorway, eyes widening at the convoy stretching behind him. Mr. Donovan, I'm here for Emma. She's safe inside, but the man, Vincent Crow, has been circling the area. Steele glanced back at 84 riders waiting in formation. Let him circle. We'll be here. Steele followed Margaret through empty hallways, his boots echoing against linoleum. 9 years since he'd held his brother's daughter. 9 years of guilt and highways and running from the one thing he couldn't outrun, the promise he'd made. Margaret stopped outside the office. Through the window, Steele saw Emma sitting on a chair too big for her, wrapped in a blanket, face turned toward the floor. He pushed the door open. Emma's head snapped up. For a heartbeat, neither moved. Then recognition bloomed. Uncle Steele? Yeah, kiddo, it's me. Emma launched herself off the chair and crashed into him. Steele dropped to one knee and caught her, wrapping his arms around her shaking frame. She buried her face in his shoulder and sobbed. You came, she choked out. I promised, didn't I? But Mom said you were gone, that you didn't want to see me anymore. Steele pulled back to look in her eyes. Your mum was wrong. I never stopped caring. Not for 1 second. Emma clung tighter. Steele held her and let her cry, not saying anything about the 9 years he'd wasted or the guilt in his chest. Some apologies don't fit into words. Still reading? Drop a comment with your thoughts and don't forget to subscribe. After a few minutes, Steele asked gently, Who was that man? Vincent, Mom's boyfriend. He was mean. After Mom died, he said I was his now. Emma's voice dropped to a whisper. I heard them fighting before the accident. Then I heard Vincent on the phone saying something about brakes. Steele's blood turned to ice. Emma, did you tell anyone? She shook her head. I was scared. Vincent said bad things would happen. Listen to me. Nobody's going to hurt you. Not Vincent, not anybody. Steele walked her to the window. Come see. Emma gasped. The convoy filled the parking lot. 85 bikes, riders standing like sentinels. Chrome glinting in afternoon sun. They're all here for you, Steele said, because you're family. And family doesn't let family face danger alone. Emma stared, mouth open. I thought I was all alone. You were never alone, kid. I just took too long to remember. For the first time since he'd arrived, Emma smiled. Can I meet them? Yeah, let's go. As the sun dipped lower, the convoy remained stationed like a fortress. Inside, Steele sat with Emma, while Principal Hayes made calls to social services and police. Detective Laura Morrison was treating Emma's mother's death as suspicious now, based on what Emma had revealed. But legal custody was complicated. Emma's mother had named no guardian. Until courts decided, Child Protective Services had authority. She can't go into foster care, Steele said flatly. I understand your concern, Detective Morrison replied, but there are procedures. I grew up in foster care. I know what happens to kids who fall through cracks. Laura hesitated. There might be a kinship placement option, if you can prove relation and provide safe temporary housing. Steele had documents. Knuckles offered the clubhouse, a licensed veterans facility, clean and secure. After calls and negotiations, Laura nodded. 72-hour emergency placement, pending review. Steele exhaled. Thank you. Don't screw this up, Laura warned. Any sign of problems, she goes into foster care immediately. Outside, Knuckles saw the sedan first. It crept down the street slowly, circling once, then twice. Tinted windows, watching. "That's him," Knuckles said. Steele stepped outside. "I'll handle it." He walked into the open, arms crossed, staring directly at the sedan. The driver's window cracked open. Vincent Crow's hollow face appeared. "You're the uncle," Vincent said, "and you're the dead man who doesn't know it yet. You don't scare me. You killed Claire, cut her brake lines, and now you're trying to steal her daughter for insurance money." Vincent went pale. "You can't prove that." "Don't need to. Cops will." Steele leaned closer. "But understand this. That girl is never going to be yours, and if you come near her again, you won't have to worry about police." Vincent's hand moved toward something in the passenger seat. Cass was faster. She yanked the door open and grabbed his wrist before his fingers touched the gun. She twisted hard. Vincent screamed. The gun clattered to pavement. Steele picked it up, emptied the rounds. 85 witnesses just saw you pull a weapon. You're done." Sirens wailed in the distance. Vincent tried to reverse, but 3 motorcycles blocked his exit. Forward, more bikes closed the circle. 85 bikes, no escape. Vincent sat frozen as police arrived, and Detective Morrison placed him under arrest for attempted kidnapping, weapons charges, and suspicion of murder. As Vincent was led away in handcuffs, he twisted back. "You think you've won? You're nobody. And you're a murderer who thought a child was a paycheck," Steele replied coldly. The patrol car pulled away, carrying Vincent toward justice. The convoy watched in silence until the taillights disappeared. The clubhouse sat on the town's outskirts, a low-slung building of red brick and steel beams, surrounded by chain-link fencing and a gravel lot large enough for 100 motorcycles. A hand-carved wooden sign hung above the entrance, weathered by years of sun and rain. "Iron Sons, MC. Veterans Support and Brotherhood." When the convoy rolled in, headlights swept across rows of bikes already parked, members who'd stayed behind to prepare for Emma's arrival. The garage doors stood open, spilling warm yellow light into the darkening evening. Through the windows, Steele could see figures moving inside, arranging furniture, setting up tables. Emma sat behind Steele on his Harley, her small arms locked around his waist, her cheek pressed against the worn leather of his vest. She'd been quiet during most of the ride, just holding on, watching the world blur past in streaks of color and fading light. But as they pulled into the lot and the engine rumbled to a stop, she lifted her head and stared. "This is where you live?" she asked, her voice uncertain. "This is home," Steele said. He dismounted, then lifted her down gently, his hands steadying her small shoulders. "Come on, I'll show you around." The main room was nothing like Emma expected. She'd imagined something dark and dangerous, the kind of place her mother had whispered warnings about when bikers rode past their neighborhood. But what she saw instead surprised her. The space was large and open, with mismatched couches arranged in a loose circle around a stone fireplace that crackled with fresh logs. A pool table occupied one corner, its felt surface worn but clean. The walls were covered in framed photographs, veterans in uniform standing at attention, group rides through mountain passes with snow-capped peaks in the background, charity events where the Iron Sons handed out winter coats and hot meals to homeless families. A long wooden bar ran along the far wall, but instead of bottles of alcohol, it was lined with coffee mugs, stainless steel thermoses, and a large chalkboard listing meeting times for PTSD support groups, job placement workshops, and motorcycle maintenance classes. And everywhere were people. Men and women in leather vests moved through the space with quiet purpose. Some had grey streaking their beards and deep lines etched around their eyes. Others were younger, but carried the same weight in their expressions, the kind that comes from seeing things most people only experience in nightmares. They worked together seamlessly, setting up a folding table laden with pizza boxes still steaming from delivery, arranging blankets and pillows on one of the couches near the fireplace, laughing and talking in low, comfortable voices. When Steele and Emma walked in, the room went quiet. Not the uncomfortable silence of strangers, but the respectful pause of family making space for someone new. Heads turned, eyes found Emma, and one by one, the Iron Sons nodded or raised a hand in greeting, not overwhelming her with attention, just acknowledging her presence, making room for her. Emma pressed closer to Steele's side, one hand gripping his vest, shy but curious. "It's okay," Steele said quietly, his hand resting on her shoulder. "Nobody's going to hurt you here. I promise." Knuckles stepped forward, his scarred face softening into something almost gentle. "Welcome home, kid." A murmur of agreement rippled through the room. Men who'd fought in wars, women who'd patched up the wounded, veterans who'd seen the worst of humanity, all of them united in this moment, welcoming a frightened 7-year-old girl into their fold. Cass appeared from the kitchen area, carrying a paper plate stacked with pizza slices and a juice box with a bendy straw already inserted. Her scar caught the firelight as she smiled. "Hungry?" Cass asked, crouching down to Emma's level. Emma nodded slowly. "Good. We've got pepperoni, cheese, and something the guys are calling Supreme Chaos, which I don't recommend unless you like olives and pineapple together." Cass wrinkled her nose in mock disgust. "But we've also got cookies, chocolate chip, still warm from the oven." Emma's eyes widened. "Cookies? Fresh batch. I made them myself about 20 minutes ago." Cass winked. "Cookies first or pizza first?" Emma glanced up at Steele as if asking permission. He nodded. "Cookies first," Emma said seriously, as if making an important tactical decision. Cass laughed, a warm, genuine sound that seemed to ease some of the tension in Emma's small frame. "Smart kid. Come on, let's get you fed." She led Emma toward the table, where other members made space, pulling out a chair and making sure Emma had everything she needed. Steele watched them go, his chest tight with an emotion he couldn't quite name. Relief, maybe, or gratitude, or something deeper. The feeling of pieces falling into place after years of being scattered. Knuckles clapped him on the shoulder, his grip firm and reassuring. "You good, brother?" "Yeah," Steele said, his voice rough. "Just didn't expect all this." What, you thought we'd let her sleep on a cot in the storage room?" Knuckles shook his head, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "We've got standards, man. Besides, Cass went full mama bear mode the second she heard a kid was coming. She's been cleaning and organizing for 2 hours straight. Pretty sure she alphabetized the spice rack." Steele glanced across the room at Cass, who was now sitting beside Emma, talking animatedly about motorcycles, while Emma munched on a cookie the size of her hand. "She's good with her," Steele said. "Cass is good with everyone who needs help," Knuckles replied. "It's why she's still here instead of working at some hospital, making 3 times what we can pay her. She believes in what we do." He paused, his expression growing more serious. "We all do. That's why we showed up today. Not just for you, Steele, for her." Steele nodded, unable to find words adequate for what he felt. "Come on," Knuckles said, guiding him toward the back hallway. "Let me show you the room we set up." They walked down a narrow corridor lined with doors, some leading to storage, others to small private rooms where members could crash after long rides or late-night counseling sessions. Knuckles stopped at the last door on the right and pushed it open. The room was small but clean, with fresh white paint on the walls and a window that overlooked the gravel lot. A twin bed sat against one wall, covered in a colorful quilt that looked handmade. Beside it stood a small wooden nightstand with a lamp shaped like a motorcycle, its headlight serving as the bulb. Someone had stacked children's books on the nightstand, titles Steele recognized from his own childhood, stories about brave kids and impossible adventures. Against the opposite wall was a narrow dresser, and on top of it sat a collection of stuffed animals, a bear, a rabbit, a small dragon, all arranged neatly as if waiting for their new owner. "Cass raided 3 thrift stores and a toy donation box," Knuckles explained, "and Big Jake's wife made the quilt. Said every kid deserves something soft." Steele ran his hand along the quilt's edge, feeling the careful stitches. "I don't know how to thank you all." "You don't have to. That's what family does. Knuckles leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. But you do need to know something, Steel. This isn't temporary. That girl out there, she's ours now, all of ours. We're going to make sure she grows up knowing what loyalty means, what honor means, what it means to have people who'll ride 100 miles in the rain just because you called. Steel's throat tightened. I won't let her down. I know you won't, because you're not doing this alone. Knuckles pushed off the doorframe and headed back toward the main room. Now come on, let's get you both fed before Cass starts assigning chores. Emma sat at the long table, surrounded by Iron Sons who'd made it their mission to make her smile. Big Jake, a mountain of a man with a beard down to his chest, was performing an elaborate magic trick with a quarter that kept disappearing and reappearing behind Emma's ear. She giggled despite herself, her earlier fear melting away bit by bit. How do you do that? Emma asked, her eyes wide. Magic, little miss, Big Jake said with exaggerated seriousness. Ancient biker magic passed down through generations. I don't think that's real, Emma said, but she was grinning now. You calling me a liar? Big Jake gasped in mock offense. Steel, your niece is calling me a liar. Steel sat down beside Emma, placing a hand on her shoulder. She's a smart kid. Doesn't fall for nonsense. Nonsense? Big Jake clutched his chest dramatically. I am wounded. Wounded, I tell you. Emma laughed. A real laugh this time, bright and unguarded. It was the first time Steel had heard it, and the sound hit him harder than he expected. Cass caught his eye from across the table and smiled knowingly. As the evening wore on, Emma slowly relaxed. She asked questions about the motorcycles parked outside, about the photos on the walls, about why everyone called each other brother and sister when they weren't related. The Iron Sons answered patiently, explaining their code, their history, the bond that held them together. We choose our family, Knuckles said simply. Blood matters, sure, but loyalty matters more. Emma absorbed this, her young mind working to understand. Finally, she looked up at Steel. So I'm part of the family now. Yeah, kid, Steel said. You're one of us. Forever? Forever. Emma nodded, satisfied. Then she yawned, a huge, jaw-cracking yawn that made several of the bikers chuckle. All right, kiddo, Cass said, standing and offering her hand. Let's get you to bed before you fall asleep in your pizza. Emma took her hand and let Cass lead her toward the back hallway. Steel followed, watching as Cass showed Emma the small room, helped her change into pajamas someone had donated, and tucked her into bed with the care of someone who'd done this before. Uncle Steel! Emma's voice was small and sleepy in the dim light. Yeah? Steel sat on the edge of the bed, just like his own father had done a lifetime ago. Are you staying here too? In the clubhouse? Right down the hall, 2 doors over. And you're not leaving? Steel looked at this child, his brother's daughter, his responsibility, his second chance at keeping a promise. I'm not going anywhere, ever again. Promise? He thought about all the promises he'd made in his life. Some kept, some broken. But this one would be different. I promise, he said firmly. Emma smiled, her eyes already drifting closed. Good, because I don't want to be alone anymore. You're not alone, Steel said quietly. Not anymore. He waited until her breathing evened out, until he was certain she was asleep. Then he stood carefully, turned off the motorcycle lamp, and stepped into the hallway. Cass was waiting outside, leaning against the wall. She's going to be okay, Cass said. Kids are resilient. I hope so. She will be, because she's got you, and she's got all of us. Cass pushed off the wall. Get some sleep, Steel. Tomorrow's going to be a long day. Paperwork, social services visits, all that bureaucratic bullshit. Yeah, Steel said. Thanks, Cass, for everything. Don't mention it. That's what family does. She walked back toward the main room, where the other Iron Sons were cleaning up, putting away food, banking the fire. Steel stood in the hallway for a moment, listening to the low murmur of voices, the clink of dishes, the sound of people who cared. Then he walked to his own small room, lay down on the narrow bed, and for the first time in 9 years, fell asleep without the weight of a broken promise crushing his chest. 3 weeks passed in a blur of routines and adjustments. Emma started back at Riverside Elementary, where Principal Hayes personally walked her to class each morning and checked on her throughout the day. Janet Morrison became Emma's unofficial guardian angel at school, making sure she felt safe and included. Slowly, cautiously, Emma began to smile more, to raise her hand in class, to play with other children at recess. At the clubhouse, life took on a comfortable rhythm. Steele woke Emma each morning, helped her get ready for school, and rode her there on his Harley, a routine that made her the envy of every kid in 2nd grade. After school, Cass or one of the other Iron Sons picked her up, helped with homework, made sure she had snacks and stories, and someone to listen when she wanted to talk. The clubhouse became a strange but wonderful home. Emma learned to play pool from Big Jake, who let her win exactly half the time. She learned basic motorcycle maintenance from Knuckles, who showed her how to check oil and clean chrome. She learned to bake from Cass, who taught her that cookies could solve almost any problem. And every night, Steele tucked her into bed and reminded her, "You're not alone." But behind the scenes, the legal machinery ground forward. Detective Morrison had built a solid case against Vincent Crowe, forensic evidence of brake tampering, testimony from neighbors who'd heard arguments, financial records showing Vincent's mounting debts and Claire's modest assets. Vincent was charged with 2nd-degree murder and multiple counts of fraud. He'd be in prison for decades. The question now was custody. The state had granted Steele temporary emergency placement, but permanent guardianship required a hearing. Social workers visited the clubhouse, interviewed Emma, reviewed Steele's background. Some were skeptical. A single man with limited income living in a motorcycle clubhouse didn't fit the traditional model. Others saw what mattered: a child who was thriving, surrounded by adults who genuinely cared. The hearing was set for late November, 3 weeks after Emma had first screamed for help in that parking lot. The morning of the hearing, Steele stood in his small room, staring at the cleanest jeans he owned and a button-down shirt Knuckles had lent him. He looked at his reflection in the small mirror mounted above the dresser. A man who'd spent most of his adult life on the road, in bars, running from memories. A man who'd never imagined himself as someone's guardian. But when he thought about Emma, about her laugh when Big Jake did magic tricks, about the way she held his hand when they walked, about the trust in her eyes when she said goodnight, he knew he couldn't fail her. A knock at the door. Cass poked her head in. "You ready?" "As I'll ever be." "Good, because we've got a convoy forming." Steele raised an eyebrow. "A convoy? You think we're letting you walk into that courtroom alone?" Cass grinned. "Knuckles put out the call last night. We've got 20 Iron Sons taking the day off to show support. Judge needs to see that Emma's not just your responsibility, she's ours." Steele's chest tightened with gratitude. "You guys didn't have to—" "Yeah, we did," Cass interrupted. "Now come on, Emma's waiting." Riverside County Family Court was a brick building with tall windows and marble steps that seemed designed to intimidate. When Steele pulled into the parking lot on his Harley with Emma holding on behind him, he saw exactly what Cass had promised. 20 motorcycles lined the lot in perfect formation. Knuckles stood at the center, arms crossed, wearing his cleanest vest. Cass was there, along with Big Jake and a dozen others, veterans who'd cleared their schedules, called in favors, rearranged their lives to be present for this moment. Emma climbed off the bike and stared. "They all came?" "They all came," Steele confirmed. Knuckles approached, nodding at Steele. "Morning, brother. Ready to win this thing?" "Ready as I'll ever be." "Good, because that little girl deserves a real family. And we're going to make damn sure the judge understands what that means." They walked up the marble steps together, Steele in the lead, Emma holding his hand, 20 Iron Sons following like an honor guard. People in the lobby stopped and stared. Court clerks whispered. Security guards exchanged uncertain glances, but nobody tried to stop them. Inside courtroom 3B, Judge Patricia Reeves presided from behind a raised bench. She was in her 60s, with steel-grey hair pulled into a tight bun and eyes that had seen too many broken families to be easily fooled. She looked up as Steele, Emma, and the convoy filed in, her expression unreadable. "Mr. Donovan?" she asked. "Yes, Your Honor? And these are my family," Steele said simply. Judge Reeves studied the group. These rough-looking men and women in leather vests, standing quietly in her courtroom with military precision. She raised an eyebrow but said nothing. "Please be seated. If this story has moved you so far, hit that like button and let us know in the comments." The hearing began with formalities, case numbers, legal terminology, the reading of petitions. Then the testimonies started. Detective Laura Morrison took the stand first. Her uniform crisp, her demeanor professional. "Detective, can you describe the events of October 19th? The Family Services attorney asked. Laura recounted the entire incident. Vincent's attempt to kidnap Emma, the arrival of the Iron Sons, Vincent's arrest. Then she added something the attorney hadn't asked for. "I've been a detective for 16 years, Laura said. "And in that time, I've seen a lot of people claim they care about kids. But Mr. Donovan, he mobilized 85 people within 2 hours of learning his niece was in danger. He didn't hesitate, didn't make excuses. He just acted. That's not instability, Your Honor. That's commitment." The Family Services attorney looked annoyed at the unsolicited endorsement but moved on. Principal Margaret Hayes testified next, describing Emma's transformation over the past 3 weeks. "When Emma first came to us after her mother's death, she was withdrawn, anxious, barely spoke in class," Margaret explained. "But in the 3 weeks since her uncle took custody, she's been different. She smiles, she participates, she's made friends. Whatever Mr. Donovan is doing, it's working." "But Mrs. Hayes," the attorney pressed, "Mr. Donovan lives in a motorcycle clubhouse. Surely that's not an appropriate environment for a child." Margaret met the attorney's eyes steadily. "I visited that clubhouse twice for welfare checks. It's clean, organized, and filled with adults who genuinely care about Emma's well-being. I've seen far worse environments in traditional foster homes." The attorney frowned, but didn't argue further. Then Cass took the stand. "State your name for the record." "Cassandra Mitchell, former U.S. Army medic, current member of the Iron Sons Motorcycle Club." "Ms. Mitchell, you're not related to Emma Bradford by blood, correct?" "Correct." "Then why are you here?" Cass leaned forward slightly. "Because the Iron Sons aren't just a motorcycle club. We're a registered veterans support organization. We run PTSD counseling, job placement programs, community outreach. We help people who fall through the cracks, people the system forgets." "And you believe Emma Bradford is one of those people?" "I believe Emma Bradford is a 7-year-old girl who lost her mother, nearly got kidnapped by a murderer, and then found out she has an uncle who kept a promise he made 9 years ago." Cass's voice was firm, passionate. "That girl isn't being raised by one man in a clubhouse. She's being raised by a family of veterans who understand loyalty, honor, and sacrifice. She has 20 adults looking out for her, teaching her what it means to have people who won't abandon you when things get hard." The attorney tried to interject, but Cass wasn't finished. "You want to know if she's safe? She's safer than she's ever been. You want to know if she's loved? She has more people loving her than most kids in perfect suburban homes. So yes, Your Honor, I'm here, because Emma Bradford is ours now, and we don't let our own down." The courtroom was silent when Cass finished. Even the Family Services attorney seemed momentarily at a loss for words. Judge Reeves made a note on her legal pad, her expression still unreadable. Finally, the judge looked at Emma, who sat beside Steele, her small hand gripping his. "Emma, can you come up here for a moment?" Emma glanced at Steele, who nodded encouragingly. She stood and walked to the witness stand, climbing into the chair that was too big for her. A clerk adjusted the microphone down to her level. Judge Reeves smiled gently. "Hi, Emma. I'm Judge Reeves. Do you know why we're here today?" Emma nodded. "To decide if I can stay with Uncle Steele." "That's right. and I want to ask you some questions, okay? There are no wrong answers. I just want to know how you feel. Okay. Do you like living at the clubhouse with your uncle? Yes, Mum. Why? Emma thought for a moment. Because nobody's mean there, and Uncle Steele keeps his promises. Judge Reeves leaned forward slightly. What do you mean he keeps his promises? He promised he'd always be there if I needed him, and when I screamed his name, he came. He brought everybody. Emma gestured toward the Iron Sons sitting in the gallery. And now I'm not alone anymore. Are you happy there? Yes, Ma'am. Do you feel safe? Yes, Ma'am. Uncle Steele said nobody would hurt me, and I believe him. Judge Reeves studied Emma for a long moment. Then she asked the question that mattered most. Emma, if I let you choose, and this is entirely your choice, would you want to stay with your uncle, or would you rather go somewhere else? Emma didn't hesitate. I want to stay with Uncle Steele. He's my family. Okay, sweetheart, thank you. You can go sit down now. Emma climbed down and walked back to Steele, who pulled her close. Judge Reeves shuffled through papers, her expression thoughtful. The courtroom waited in tense silence. Finally, she spoke. This court has reviewed the evidence, the testimonies, and the welfare reports concerning Emma Bradford. She paused, looking directly at Steele. Mr. Donovan, I'll be frank with you. When I first saw this case, I had reservations. A motorcycle clubhouse is not a conventional home for a child, and your lifestyle, while legal, is not what most people would consider traditional. Steele's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. However, Judge Reeves continued, this court does not make decisions based on convention. It makes decisions based on what is in the best interest of the child, and the evidence overwhelmingly shows that Emma Bradford is thriving in your care. She's safe. She's loved. She's surrounded by adults who've demonstrated repeatedly and publicly their commitment to her well-being. The judge looked at Emma, then back at Steele. Permanent custody is granted to Marcus Donovan, effective immediately. Steele's breath caught. Emma squeezed his hand so tightly his fingers went numb. Mr. Donovan, Judge Reeves added, her voice softer now, don't let her down. I won't, Your Honor, Steele said, his voice rough with emotion. I promise. Then this hearing is concluded. The gavel fell. For a moment, no one moved. Then Emma threw her arms around Steele's neck, and he lifted her up, holding her tight as she whispered, We won. We won. Behind them, the Iron Sons erupted into quiet applause, not loud or showy, just a chorus of approval from people who understood exactly what this moment meant. Knuckles approached, gripping Steele's shoulder. Told you, brother. Family wins. Cass wiped her eyes quickly, pretending she had something in them. Big Jake grinned so wide his beard seemed to double in size. And Steele just held his niece and felt the weight of 9 years of guilt finally lift from his shoulders. He'd kept his promise. 6 months later, spring had transformed the world into something green and alive. Emma stood in the clubhouse garage, sunlight streaming through the open bay doors, wearing a child-sized leather vest that Knuckles had custom-made for her 8th birthday. The back bore the Iron Sons patch, a steel fist gripping a broken chain, and the inside lining was covered in signatures. Every member of the club had signed their name, along with a message. Stay strong, little sister. Big Jake, you're tougher than you know. Cass, welcome to the family. Knuckles and dozens more, each one a promise written in permanent ink. Today was Emma's birthday, and the Iron Sons were taking her on her first real ride, not just a trip to school or around the neighborhood, but a 50-mile run through the mountains to a lake where they'd planned a full-day picnic. Emma had been counting down the days for weeks, barely able to contain her excitement. Steele adjusted her helmet, making sure it fit snugly but comfortably. You ready for this? I've been ready for weeks, Emma said, bouncing on her toes. Remember the rules? Hold on tight, don't let go, and if I need to stop, tap your shoulder twice. That's my girl. Steele ruffled her hair. All right, let's mount up. Emma climbed onto the back of Steele's Harley with practiced ease, wrapping her arms around his waist. Around them, 85 motorcycles roared to life in perfect synchronization, a thunder that echoed off the garage walls and rolled out into the morning air. Knuckles pulled up beside them on his own bike, grinning. "You lead today, Steele. Birthday girl gets the front position." Steele nodded, his chest tight with an emotion he still didn't have a name for. He kicked his Harley into gear, and the convoy began to roll. They moved through town in formation, Steele and Emma at the front, Knuckles and Cass flanking them, and the rest of the Iron Sons stretching behind in perfect V-shape. People on sidewalks stopped to watch, some waving, others filming on their phones. A few recognized Emma and cheered. The little girl who'd screamed for help 6 months ago was now riding at the front of a convoy, her laughter carried on the wind. As they left the city limits and hit the open highway, the world opened up. Mountains rose ahead, their peaks still touched with snow despite the warming season. The road curved and climbed, winding through forests of pine and aspen. Sunlight filtered through the canopy, dappling the pavement in patterns of gold and shadow. Emma leaned forward and shouted over the engine noise, "Uncle Steele?" "Yeah, this is the best birthday ever." Steele grinned, his heart feeling lighter than it had in years. "We're just getting started, kid." They rode for over an hour, the convoy moving as one organism through the mountain passes. When they finally reached the lake, a pristine stretch of blue water surrounded by evergreens, the bikers pulled into a clearing and killed their engines. The sudden silence was almost startling. Emma hopped off the bike, pulled off her helmet and spun in a circle, taking in the view. "It's beautiful. Wait till you see what we've got planned," Cass said, walking over with a massive cooler. "We've got food, games, and Big Jake claims he can skip a stone 30 times. "No way," Emma said. "Way," Big Jake called from across the clearing. "Watch and learn, little miss." The day unfolded like a perfect dream. The Iron Sons set up picnic tables under the trees, laying out food they'd been preparing for days: grilled burgers, potato salad, fresh fruit, and a birthday cake Cass had baked and decorated with motorcycle designs. Emma ran along the lakeshore with a few of the younger members, skipping stones and searching for interesting rocks. Big Jake did indeed skip a stone 30 times, to Emma's amazement. Steele sat on a log near the water's edge, watching his niece laugh and play with people who'd become family in the truest sense. Knuckles settled beside him, handing him a cold soda. "She's happy," Knuckles observed. "Yeah," Steele agreed. "She really is. You did good, brother, kept your promise." Steele was quiet for a moment, watching Emma chase butterflies with Cass. "I almost didn't, almost let fear talk me out of it. But you didn't. That's what matters." Knuckles took a sip of his own drink. "You know what the difference is between people who keep promises and people who don't?" "What?" "People who keep promises understand that it's not about being perfect. It's about showing up even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard." Knuckles gestured toward Emma. "That kid's going to remember this day for the rest of her life, not because we threw her a party, but because she knows, really knows, that she's got a family who won't abandon her." Steele nodded, his throat tight. "Come on," Knuckles said, standing. "Let's go see if Big Jake can really skip a stone 30 times, or if he's full of shit." Steele laughed and followed. As the afternoon wore into evening, the Iron Sons gathered around the picnic tables to sing Happy Birthday. Emma stood in front of her cake, 8 candles flickering in the mountain breeze, her face glowing with joy. "Make a wish," Cass said. Emma closed her eyes tight, thought for a moment, and blew out all 8 candles in one breath. Everyone cheered. "What did you wish for?" Big Jake asked. "Can't tell you," Emma said solemnly, "or it won't come true." Smart kid. But later, when it was just Emma and Steele sitting by the water's edge, watching the sun set over the mountains and paint the sky in shades of orange and purple, Emma leaned against his shoulder. "Uncle Steele." "Yeah? Can I tell you what I wished for?" "Sure, kid." Emma looked up at him, her eyes serious. "I wished that this would never end, that we could always be together, that the family would always stay." Steele pulled her close, his arm around her small shoulders. You know what? I think that wish is already coming true. Really? Really? Because family isn't something that ends, Emma. It's something you build. And we've built something strong here. Something that's going to last. Emma smiled and nestled closer. I love you, Uncle Steele. Steele's chest tightened, emotions threatening to overwhelm him. I love you too, kid. More than you know. They sat there in comfortable silence, watching the sun sink below the peaks while behind them, the Iron Sons packed up gear and told stories and laughed the way families do when they're together and happy. As darkness fell and stars began to appear overhead, the convoy prepared for the ride home. Emma climbed back onto Steele's Harley, her birthday vest catching the moonlight, her helmet secure. Ready? Steele asked. Ready, Emma confirmed. He started the engine. Around them, 85 motorcycles roared to life once more, their headlights cutting through the darkness like beacons. They rolled out in formation, moving through the mountain night with perfect precision. Emma held on tight, not from fear, but from trust. She knew her uncle wouldn't let her fall, knew the family riding behind them would never let her face danger alone. As they descended from the mountains and the lights of town appeared in the valley below, Emma leaned forward one last time. Uncle Steele. Yeah? Thank you. For what? For keeping your promise, for bringing the family, for showing up when I needed you. Steele's throat tightened so much he could barely speak. Always, kid. Always. The convoy roared through the night, 85 bikes carrying a family bound not by blood, but by something stronger. By choice, by loyalty, by promises kept even when the world said it was easier to break them. A little girl who'd screamed for help and found an army. A man who'd made a promise and refused to let it die. And a brotherhood that understood the simplest, most powerful truth of all. Family isn't about perfection. It's about showing up. Again and again and again. No matter what. Thanks for riding with us through Emma and Steele's story. If it touched your heart, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. There are more stories like this coming, and we'd love to have you along for the journey. Until next time, ride safe, keep your promises, and never forget that family is whoever shows up when you need them most.